This is the first of the 3 weeks about how we're going to deal with the things that we need to buy and do to make Pesach work out. So, not necessarily in order of importance, but the first 5 or 6 things on this page are things that always come up, and I thought we would just go over them before we go into more specific areas. So these are items which are either controversy today, there'll be some others, or are customs that people are always asking about. So let's begin with the first one, which is what are these and should I do them? Number one is gebrachs. What does that mean? Gebrachs is a Yiddish word, and it means to dunk, to put something in, right? And what they do is they break the matzah and you put it in soup. That's what we do, right? When we can make matzah balls, we can make many things out of matzah or matzah meal, and we put it in liquid, right? Or we make it with liquid. So there is a significant minority, but a significant one, of observant Jews who follow a custom that under no way should matzah or a matzah product come into contact with liquid over Pesach, because they're concerned that perhaps the matzah was made in a way, that will cause that it'll have flour left on the matzah, and when you add water to it, then the matzah at that point will become chametz, right? Because you have actual flour. So therefore, they have a custom that they don't take anything that has any matzah or matzah product, matzah meal, anything like that, and put it anywhere near liquid. In general, when you see that they have products in their homes that they use, they're usually made out of potato starch rather than matzah meal. This is a custom that's followed by many Hasidim, by many Jews from Poland, from Romania, from Hungary, from the world of the Hasidic world. And I will tell you in no unequivocal terms, without a question, that if you are not following this custom, do not do this. I do not follow this custom. It is extremely difficult, and the major halakhic authorities that we follow, including the Mishnah Berurah, right, do not do this. They do allow you to put matzah in soup. In fact, there's a famous story, I don't know if it's a true story, but there's a famous story that the Chafetz Chaim was the author of the Mishnah Berurah, which is the authoritative book of Jewish law for the Ashkenazic world. That every year, right before Pesach began, he would take a glass of water, put a stick of matzah in it, and put it in his window, so that people would stop asking him this question, because it's among the some of the very observant communities, they would not do gebrachs. You'll find Chabad does not do it. They're very, very, very precise about it. They'll actually, when they eat matzah at the table, they'll put it in a bag. They'll eat it out of a bag so that none of the matzah will spill anywhere and perhaps get into your soup. They take this very seriously. But if you do not have this custom, it is not a sign of you being more religious by assuming it. There is no reason for you to assume this custom unless you marry into one of these families or you are of these families. But otherwise, I cannot stress enough that you really should stay away from doing that. The second thing is shmura. So shmura, of course, is in regard to matzah. You hear the expression shmura matzah. Shmura matzah means the following. It means that the grain, the wheat primarily, that's used in matzah was guarded. The word shmura means guarded. It was guarded from the moment it was harvested until it's finished, until it's a piece of matzah. That's, come in. That's the idea of shmura. Most matzah that is not shmura is guarded from the moment it becomes a flour, right? From the time it becomes a flour until it becomes, at the end, when it becomes matzah. That's normal matzah, is that way. Shmura matzah has that additional point to it. It's also the hand matzahs that you see, the round ones that are made by hand, those are all shmura matzah. They have now developed machine matzahs, not now, the last 100 years or so, also have developed machine matzahs that are also made from this type of flour. There's an argument as to which is better, a machine or a hand. Machines clearly can make matzah faster and more efficiently than human beings can. However, there is a long-held custom to use hand matzah in certain cases. So how how does shmura apply to us? So shmura applies, the law of shmura applies to anything that is made from matzah. That's matzah meal, cake meal, all of these things have the question of, should I keep shmura or should I not? So there's certainly, in this case, if you would want to do it, you have definitely who to rely on, and it's a good thing. Do you have to? I would say that you have to keep shmura in the following way, which is at your Seder, when you have matzah at your Seder, that you should then use the hand shmura matzah. That is certainly the most traditional one. That is the one that is the most common for such a thing, and it is the most traditional, heading back, going back for long periods, and has the least amount of arguments about it. That is clearly the best. It could be white shmura matzah, it could be whole wheat shmura matzah, but it could be any. Did you want to ask something?
Yes. Last couple of years, we bought the shmura matzah on the box, and most of them were broke. So how do you do for
it's just, you have to be fortunate. I would tell you, maybe I've had 2 pieces broken. It probably depends where you buy it, as to how much movement. Right? Like, for instance, I buy it from someone who brings it in from Montreal, and I've never had a problem. But it's an issue. You have to watch for it. But just to be succinct with this, you can have, if you choose to, you can have all of your matzah meal, all of your cake meal, all of those types of things can all be shmura. But unless you want to make everything shmura matzah, which will increase your costs considerably, probably between 50 and 80% for all of those products. I'm sorry, you can come up here if you'd like, sir, if it's helpful. We've only covered number 1. So I'll finish number 2, and then I'll just say number 1 quickly for all of you. So in case of shmura matzah, I would strongly recommend that you use shmura matzah at the Seder, and that if you want to use shmura for everything else, for either all of your matzah meal, that's fine, you can do it. But unless that's how you want to do things all the time, it's not necessary. Most of the homes that you're going to go to, or the people that we know for here, do not do that. They're the same people who do the gebrachs, number 1, will also do everything shmura. But in general, we don't do everything in shmura. But I do suggest that at least for your Seder, that you buy matzah, a couple of pounds of matzah to use that are shmura matzah, because that is literally what it talks about in the Haggadah, right? And it's called Leil Shmurim. There's many references to this in different ways, but this is certainly a good thing. So just to reiterate with gebrachs is a custom by some Hasidic groups and some others. It is, as I said before, without question, that if you do not have this custom, it is strongly recommended not to. I do not accept gebrachs, which is the idea is the inability to put matzah meal, or anything from matzah into any liquid. Do not do that. Right? Do not take that custom. Unless you have some extraordinary reason. But it makes things very difficult, and our halachic understanding, according to our customs, is that it's not necessary. All right, the number 3 is kitnios, or also referred to as kitniot, which are legumes. This is also a custom. This is a custom for Ashkenazim versus Sephardim. Sephardim, you might have heard, they eat rice on Passover, they eat beans on Passover, peas, and Ashkenazim don't. We don't eat any of those things. That's a rabbinic law that was enacted by the rabbis for numerous reasons. Some have to do with practicality, that they found that in these things, that they looked a lot like flour, often real flour could get mixed up with it. Many different reasons, but for many years, for a number of centuries, the Ashkenazim have accepted that they are not going to eat these kitnios. And the only time that you're going to come across this as an issue is that you'll see some products in the stores that will say on the certification, this is only for those who are of a Sephardic background or who eat kitnios.
Mustard.
Right? What?
Mustard's one of them.
Yeah, because mustard seed is an example. There's many issues, and we'll get into some details. But in general, it is the accepted custom with Ashkenazim not to eat kitniyot. So we usually don't do that. We don't eat rice. We don't eat peas. For Sephardim, it is 100% fine. There is absolutely nothing wrong. They're not being lenient. Their communities did not enact this custom by the rabbis, or this law by the rabbis. But therefore, it's perfectly okay. And the question is going to come up, so I'll answer it now, is if you have Sephardic friends, are you allowed to eat at their house on Passover? So the answer is as long as everything else is fine, you're not allowed to eat the kitniyot, but you are allowed to eat from the same pots. Not everybody agrees with that, but that is the commonly held opinion, so that if I were invited to the home of a Sephardic person, I can't eat rice while they could eat it at the table, but I could eat out of a pot that they used 2 days before to make rice. That was a Passover pot. So therefore, I would be allowed, yes.
Yeah, you know what I did a few years ago? I shopped had no frills, and I bought corn pasta that was kosher for Passover. I didn't think anything of, and I just bought the corn.
Yeah, well, I guess you still have it.
No, I don't.
All right, let's go on. Egg and flavored matzah. Egg matzah is a very common. Flavored matzah, sometimes you come across garlic or onion matzah.
Number 4.
Oh, I skipped chumros. Okay, let's do number 4. Chumros means extreme opinions, right? There is the law, and then there are chumros, right? Laws that go beyond the law. Right? If I tell you that Shabbat ends 45 minutes after sunset, you want to follow a chumrah, a more strict opinion. You might say, I'm going to wait 72 minutes after sunset. Right? That's an example. In general, when it comes to chumrot, if they are a particular one that a person might want in their life, that they may have a reason because of their personality, it's fine. You always have to make sure that when you want to do something stringent like that it affects you more than it affects other people. Like, for instance, the guy who always tells me he wants to keep 72 minutes after sunset because on Saturday night, because he wants to be stricter about it, but that means his wife is terribly unhappy because they can't go out now on Saturday night because he's added 40 minutes to the time. So therefore, it's having more of an effect on his wife than on him. So one needs to be careful in general about those. But when it comes to Passover, it is much more common that we will accept these chumrot, these extra stringent opinions. So sometimes you will speak to people and the letter of the law will be one way, and on Passover they'll be stricter. So that you'll find that people will go out of their way to be extra strict in certain areas. And it's perfectly legitimate. You don't have to do it. Right? When you come across this, if you're speaking with people and they tell you that they do this, or this, or they don't. Some people might have a more stringent opinion that they will not eat processed food on Passover. So they'll only eat what they make. Right? Other people will say, I won't eat out on Passover. These are chumrot. That's what they are. You're allowed to eat out on Passover. You're allowed to eat food that's been processed by a company as long as it's kosher with a reliable certification. But if you wanted to say, Passover is so important to me and it's so stringent that I would prefer not to, you have a grounds. That's what chumrot mean. So you're going to come across that in your conversations. The next is the egg and flavored matzah. They're really two different things. Flavored matzah, primarily you're going to find garlic and onion. I have never come across that kosher for Passover. You will find it in some stores because the people who run the stores don't necessarily understand. But there is matzah that you can buy all year, and it's not necessarily kosher for Passover. The matzah has to be made with the intention that it's going to be used for Passover, so that they're careful what's around it. The onion and garlic matzahs, every time I've looked over the years, it's always been not kosher for Passover. So those types of matzahs you have to stay away from. It's like eating bread. Egg matzah is different. Egg matzah is an interesting thing because in and of itself, to the letter of the law, it is not chametz. It's kosher for Passover. It's basically what makes it different than regular matzah. Regular matzah is flour and water, and that's it. Right, egg matzah is flour, water, and some egg. It makes it lighter. It makes it easier to digest. So the fact is that in the laws of Passover, it talks about lechem oni. Lechem oni means poor person's bread. Poor person's bread traditionally is flour and water, and therefore, when one eats matzah, they're supposed to be eating a piece of matzah made out of flour and water. However, there is, if you look at the boxes of egg matzah, you'll notice that very often, sometimes they write this in Yiddish, they're a little tricky, but they will say on it that it is permissible to eat egg matzah on Passover for those who are elderly or ill. That is, people who can't digest the matzah because they're either older or they're not healthy, then they're allowed to eat it. But other than that, it is the accepted rule that we should not use egg matzah. It's, if you have a need for it, you have somebody who needs it, you can have it in your house. It's kosher for Passover. You don't have to sell it. You don't have to put it anywhere special. But we really shouldn't eat it ourselves. Because it is not the real definition of what matzah is, but if there's a need, they may. And you'll notice now when you look at the boxes that some of the boxes will say what I just told you in English right on it, some of them won't say anything, and some of them will say it in Yiddish, that it's only for those people who are ill or elderly and have been advised that they should eat this type of matzah so that they can digest it. Right? So, but otherwise the average person shouldn't. The only time that the average person would use egg matzah would be when Passover falls out on Saturday night, where the first Seder is Saturday night. And what happens then is that on Shabbos, already you are stuck. You have to eat bread on Shabbos, right? You're supposed to have a meal with bread. But after the fourth hour of the day, you're not allowed to eat chametz on the day before Passover, which is the same day. So how do you accomplish eating bread but not eating bread? Right? That's the problem when it falls out that way. So a number of answers. One is you eat very early, before the fourth hour. So you get up real early and you have your bread and you finish it and you get rid of all of the chametz from your house before that time comes. The other one is that you've already gotten rid of everything and you use egg matzah, because egg matzah is not really matzah, because you're not supposed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach, but you're allowed to eat that in this specific circumstance because it's not really matzah. On the other hand, it's not chametz, right? And you say the same blessing as you'd say on a piece of challah. So therefore, you can accomplish it in the same way, right? So that's about the only time that the average person would use it, and otherwise, I would advise you not to use egg matzah unless you had a medical need.
Excuse me, so when is that you would eat this egg matzah for lunch?
On Saturday afternoon, when Pesach starts on Saturday night.
This year?
No, this year Passover is already enacted on Friday night.
It would be Friday.
Right, this would be where Passover begins Saturday night, and you have a regular Shabbos HaGadol is on that day. That's one of the reasons why they make sure that they have meals. A lot of shuls make meals, so they can do it, and your house can already be cleaned.
How often does it start on Saturday night?
I don't know, about maybe once every 5 years. Yes.
And what about whole wheat matzah?
So I'll get to it. I'll talk about it. Whole wheat matzah is fine, but we'll talk about it when we talk about different kinds of matzahs. The last one is quinoa and really Diet Coke, not Coke. So Coke and any type of processed beverage certainly has to say that it's kosher for Passover. It has to be written on it, kosher for Passover. Because the main problem with the soft drinks is that they use corn syrup as a sweetener, and therefore Coke will switch to beet sugar or cane sugar in the Passover ones. So therefore, when you drink Coke, you'll notice it tastes a little different, and it's different because they've switched from one type of sweetener to another. That's with the regular Coke. With the Diet Coke, the problem is with the sweetener. The sweetener in the Diet Coke is a derivative. It's a derivative of kitnias. As you said before, kitnias is not eaten by Ashkenazim, and therefore the question is, do we say only that you don't eat kitnias, or you even take things that are extrapolated from kitnias, like a chemical that comes out of, let's say you have a chemical that comes from beans, right? Would you be allowed to use that chemical? Because the beans are forbidden rabbinically because you might mix it with flour and different types of things. But certainly this chemical you wouldn't. So are you allowed to, or are you not? And this has been a big issue here in Toronto for a number of years. The COR will tell you in their book, I haven't looked at it precisely, but they will tell you that Ashkenazim cannot drink Diet Coke. On the other hand, there are other certifications in the United States. Last year it included the Star K and the OU. I don't know about this year. I haven't seen all their books yet. They all said that you can drink it, and it was all and And here in Toronto, I mean, any responsible rabbi is not going to tell you to go against the opinion of the COR, which is all of us together, or some of the other very renowned rabbis who live here. But one does have the opportunity to do as they see, and there are other responsible kosher verifiers, right, companies, who say it's okay. But here you will see, when you go into the store, that they'll have a sign up that this is only kosher for Sephardim, right? And that's probably what the COR says in the book. I haven't seen the book yet. Okay, so that's Coke and Diet Coke. So since you asked about matzah, so preferably matzah should be made from wheat. Preferably, but really it can be made from any of the basic grains that we use for breads, according to the Torah. We don't often make bread out of oats, but if you would make bread out of oats, you'd say the blessing of hamotzi. It would be like wheat in that way. So too, matzah made from oats is the same idea. You have a number of different things. For people who have an allergy to eating anything made from wheat, they will often eat oats or a different type of spelt's another one that they'll eat, and it's perfectly fine. It's 100% fine. If you want to do it, you don't even have to be allergic, you can do it. But I will warn you that the price is about 300%, 3 times the price, because it's very rare. Now, for someone to make oat matzah, rather than it costing, I don't know, make up the numbers, $20 a pound, it'll be $50 a pound. I mean, it's extraordinarily more, because it's not made by that many places. It's made only for people really who have a special dietary need. So if you have that need, you might want to do that. Yes?
Is there any other diet drinks you can eat at Passover?
Lots of them. There are lots of them, and they're just not. It all depends how they're made. So you'll see in the store that they have many of the diet drinks that are kosher for Passover. They're just made with a different. Actually, I think they might even use saccharin, which we don't see anymore. Right? They don't use it, but some of them use a different sweetener rather than aspartame. Okay, that's the difference. Okay, so now let's go into the next part. Unless there are any questions on those.
Quinoa.
Oh, okay, quinoa. So quinoa is interesting. Quinoa is definitely not an issue in and of itself. There are some people here in Toronto that raised that it was an issue, and therefore the COR doesn't endorse eating quinoa because they consider it to be kitnio. So Ashkenazim couldn't eat it, according to their opinion. You will find in the stores that there is quinoa with a kosher certification, and if it's your choice to do as you see fit, if it's a reliable certification, it could be okay. There was a point where they used to say that quinoa in general was fine, and you didn't even need it with special certification. But then the Star K, which is the Baltimore certifiers, sent somebody to the fields in one of the South American countries, and they found that it was extremely common that they would mix it with barley, which you can't use on, right? It becomes chametz. So therefore they had a problem with it, and they said that you could only use, those who allowed the use of quinoa, who said you can only use it if it has a reliable certification for Passover, right? Which is much stricter than it used to be. And there are those here, very, very renowned people in Toronto, who say you shouldn't use it at all. But again, it's not like you can't find it with a reliable certification. Okay? Yes?
What does the sign look like when it says only for, not for Ashkenazi?
It'll usually say, in English it'll say that it's certified by the Sephardic Council of Ontario, and it'll say for Sephardim. In Hebrew it'll say la'ochle kitniot bilvad, only for those who eat kitnio, and that's the telltale sign. And it's very, let's say it's not uncommon to find that in Israeli goods. You'll very, very rarely find it in anything made in North America, but if you start buying things from Israel, it is much more common, because Israel has a preponderance of Sephardim, right? There's a large number of Sephardim there, and therefore they would be foolish, right, not to serve that community. Here, it's not as large, and therefore we don't find it. Right? Okay. Also, by the way, just going back to the gebruchs and the shmura, if any of you are going away to a hotel, like you're going on a Passover trip, so almost all of the hotels do not allow gebruchs, right, dunking your matzah, and they also are totally shmura. In other words, what they're doing is that they're trying to be open to anybody, because it's business, so they will take the most extreme opinions. So you're allowed to eat it, right? You're allowed to follow gebruchs if you want when you go away, but you may just be advised that if you're going to be going to Saint Martin on this fancy trip, or you go to Whistler on the fancy trip, chances are you won't be eating matzah balls. There's something to keep in mind. Okay, buying Passover products. What needs special Passover certification? Right? We already know that the food we eat has to be kosher. Some things we know are kosher, right? And they are, if you want, Pesach. There's a couple of chairs in my office you can bring out. It's open. So there's, we know that everything we eat has to be kosher. So most things have to be certified kosher. Some things don't have to be. You don't have to certify an apple as being kosher. You know it's kosher, right? So some things don't have to be for everyday use. And most things do. So Passover now, we have an added stringency of Passover food. And Passover food, if you add to it, right, it has the laws of chametz. So therefore you have to have a special certification on top of it that is also, this is not only kosher, but it's kosher for Passover. It's both, right? However, there are certain items, which I gave you a list of, which are some things are kosher without any certification, even for Passover, and some things are kosher with regular kosher certification, even without the Passover certification, and you can use those. And then anything else that I didn't tell you, unless you find something that I didn't come across, and you're certainly welcome to call me and ask. Anything else, you'd have to have special certification. So if you look on the page, I have one page that says no certification needed at all, and the next page says does not need special Passover certification. Now, if you'll notice with the does not need certification at all, the majority of these things aren't even food, right? But there are things about a number of, but the fact is that we're not supposed to use chametz, not supposed to eat it, not supposed to use it. So therefore, a lot of these things that are on here, you could be concerned about. For instance, balloons. Who would think there'd be a problem with balloons? Except I found out, sadly the hard way one year, that balloons often have flour inside of them in order so that when you put your lips on it, they'll separate. When you blow into it, the flour makes it so that the two pieces don't stick. Just like a lot of times the gloves that doctors use, that medical professionals use, will have cornstarch on them because they want to make it easy for them to put them on. Right? Those are all questions that raise for Passover. So here are a list of things, right? Like you see I have rubber latex gloves, starch-free. You have to get the ones that are starch-free, and they'll actually tell you that because there are people who can't deal with the starch. A couple of things that I'm not going to go through the whole thing, that's why I gave you the paper, but a couple of things just to make note of that you might not expect. One of them are napkins and paper towels. Even some paper plates. What happens with a lot of these things is they put starch into them in order to make them more sturdy. Like a paper plate is the most obvious one. That the paper plates, the idea is, right, if you want to sell paper plates, you want to sell the ones that are as thin as possible that still do the job because you'll make more money. So therefore, in order for them to make them as thin as they can, they put cornstarch on it in order to make it so it's stiff, so that when you have it, right, and it won't bend over. So during the year, it's no problem. But on Passover, you're going to put wet food on this. It's going to now have a problem with the cornstarch because we don't eat anything from corn. So therefore, there are certain things like, as I said, some napkins, some paper towels you have to be careful of. It doesn't mean you can't use them. You just have to keep them away from liquids. What you're going to do with a paper towel if you're not going to put it with liquid, I have no idea. But in general, you have to do that. A couple of the other surprises. Let's see, to look at them with coffee is a good one. We look at does not need special Passover certification. So we look at it here, it says Folgers and Taster's Choice instant regular coffee that has an OU on it. All of those two brands are kosher for Passover even though they don't say so. Any other brand that you get has to say it's kosher for Passover. That's instant coffee.
Yeah.
That's not the same as regular coffee, yes?
So, like, if you're using a a jar with Folgers, right, in a year, should you buy a new one, or does it?
Well, you really should always buy a new one, because we're not careful during the year to make sure that nothing that had comets with it or along with it went into there. Now, you might be careful not to mix milk and meat, but we have no reason to be careful about comets in October, right? So it's always good to buy a new one, and but you have to be very specific with the coffee. In other words, you can go into the kosher section and any the Passover stores like Sobeys, these places that have somebody watching them, and you can go into the kosher section and buy Passover coffee.
I did.
It's very expensive and it's usually not the best, but you can do that, or you can buy one of these two, Folgers or Taster's Choice that has the OU. That was fine. For those who, I don't know if I wrote it down, but if you are like me, who does not like instant coffee and you use ground coffee,
Yeah.
so if you buy beans,
Yeah.
right, unprocessed beans, raw, like, they're roasted, but nothing more than that, those are fine to use as is on Passover. You don't need that those beans need to be certified. The problem that can come up is only in the grinding. Right? If you go to a place where they grind it for you, you have to know what they use the grinder for. For instance, if you go, like I go to a place where he's a micro brewer, I'm a micro roaster. That is, he roasts right there. This fellow roasts right in the room that I go, and he sells it to different stores. So because they're a sort of a gourmet level place, they have many different grinders, because you can't put a grinder with flavored coffee and then put a regular coffee in and expect that it's not going to carry over. It will carry over, and then your regular coffee will have a taste, and people will not want that. So they'll have separate ones. So in this place where I go, in my discussions with some of the other rabbis, it was clear I can simply go in there before Passover, buy it, grind it from that specific machine, and I could use it. Or what I usually do myself is that I grind it myself.
Question.
Yeah.
If you have a coffee grinder, and I have one of these Nestle's instant things where you have the prepackaged coffee. Can't you, even though they're plain, there's no flavoring or anything in it?
Well, you'd have to know the facts. For instance, if you have a coffee maker and that you've never washed, like where it would come into touch with comets,
right.
You've been careful never to wipe any of the insides down with a towel that might be dirty, and nothing has ever gone into it, including cleaning it, right? Because when you clean them, you usually clean it with vinegar. So then you're telling me basically that as far as comets is concerned, you were guarding it.
Right.
So then it would be fine.
And if you were to buy beans and you have a grinder?
So as long, again, if the grinder, you didn't put your grinder for some reason in a dishwasher, or
right.
you used it where there's comets, then you'd be allowed to use the grinder. Right? And then you can just buy beans and grind them. Yes.
The glass carafe of most coffee makers are glass. So the glass can be immersed in boiling water.
But glass, we'll talk about next week how we kosher glass, but you could do that if you wanted to. Although it's probably, just practically, to buy a specific coffee maker for Passover is, it's less than $20. It's not a lot of money, and it's usually worth it. Even to replace the glass carafe, it costs more. So just something to keep in mind. In our house, what we do is I bought the French press, right, or the Bodum, which is, right, you put the coffee in the water and then you push the plunger eventually, right? And that way I can not only use it myself on Passover, because it's only for Passover, but I can also use it on Yom Tov, right? Because it's not electric. I don't have to turn it on and off. I can just do it, and I can have fresh coffee that
You
way.
still have to put that glass into boiling water too.
Well, no, it's only for Passover. I only use it for Passover.
Okay, I want to use during the year.
Okay, now in this list, excuse me, did someone say something?
So you suggest you get the coffee maker, right?
I suggested, you see, when it comes to appliances, the biggest problem with appliances is what gets inside of them, not what's on the outside of them. Now, if you go, I am sure that you have an impeccable kitchen, but I would bet you if you take apart your blender or your hand thing that you use like to make bread or cakes, you will find inside of that machine flour. Right? And that flour can come out, it can move. So Passover, we're very stringent. So I always suggest not to use any of those things for that reason, and to buy more. Today, thank God, for the most part, most of us have the ability to do this, if maybe not all in 1 year, but over a couple years, and we add to our repertoire kitchen tools for the week. It's amazing how much stuff we have for 1 week, right? But we do. A couple of the other ones that are interesting that we need to look at are milk, sugar, salt. All right, so for instance, milk. Milk, of course, milk. You can't. What can be chametz in milk in of itself? So the problem is, the biggest problem with milk is that our milk is fortified. That is, they put extra vitamins in by law, and they have vitamin D. Vitamin D is chametz. It's made from chametz, and therefore you need to buy kosher for Passover milk. That could be Chalav Yisrael milk or regular milk, depending on what you do, but it has to be kosher for Passover. If this is not going to happen here in Toronto, but it's just an interesting point for our listeners and anybody else who wants to know, that if, let's say, you went to the store and there was no more milk, no more Passover milk, and it's not Passover yet, but it's all gone. For whatever reason, they don't have any. Or you live in a small town, like I grew up in, and they didn't have kosher Passover milk. So what did you do? So in such a case, what you do is a person buys the milk before Passover, and the small amount of chametz that's in it, because it's not Passover yet, becomes bottle. It's like it doesn't exist. On Passover, that doesn't happen, but before it does. And since it happened before, I know this sounds sort of like a legal fiction, but it's real. I mean, it does make a difference. What happens is then, if you bought it before, then you can use it. If you buy it on Passover, then you can't use it. So therefore, we used to go, myself, when I was a kid, we used to have to go to the store and buy the milk before Passover because of that problem. Here today, you're not going to have that problem. The only time you might have trouble getting milk would be like 2 days after Passover, because they haven't milked the cows over Passover, or at least done all of the things and shipped it out and so forth. So you may not have it in the stores, but eventually you get it. So that's one. Sugar does not need to be special for Passover, but it does need to have regular supervision that it's kosher.
Yeah, I already bought sugar. It's
Great.
kosher for Passover, and brown sugar too.
Okay, brown sugar and what do you call it? For cakes.
Icing sugar.
Right. All these other types, they all need to be certified for Passover, because I know that I was doing myself supervision many years ago in Colorado in a natural food store. We found that in a lot of the sugars, they put milk products in there because it makes it fluffy. The whey makes it fluffy, and they also sometimes put other things that were chametz into it in order to make that sugar different than regular sugar and make it special sugar. So those have to be certified kosher for Passover. Any type of sugar other than regular sugar that you would use just to normally bake with. The regular sugar just has to be kosher. Salt, also, if it's not iodized, right, the salt is fine. Without a special certification, and sea salt. If you buy sea salt, also that's fine. Some of the other areas that people, then we'll move on to the next part.
Rabbi,
But
even if the sea salt has like an OU on it.
what does?
If they find sea salt, doesn't they kosher Pesach, but
Right.
it has OU.
That's all you need. That's all you need. You don't need kosher Passover in it. But there's let's see if there's anything else particular. So in general, right, we're dealing here with the one other area that you should know about would have to do with dishwashing, right? Like the liquids for dishwashing or for a dishwasher. If you have a kosher Passover dishwasher, or you have, or you're going to just wash dishes. So you'll see that I have on this list. Dishwasher detergents do not need special Passover certification. Automatic dishwasher detergent does not need, and I give you names of specific ones that we know are okay, that you should try to use. Now, there is opinions that say that dishwashing liquids and for either by hand or by machine don't have to be kosher at all. And that's a very common opinion. But for Passover, you want to be a little bit more strict. It's only 1 week, so then I would suggest using these. Okay, now, can I trust all kosher symbols?
One quick question
Yes.
about the infant formula. All
Okay.
these with the regular kosher sign, it's okay?
All the ones I listed here for baby formula are okay, but they're
Just new bottles.
right because they're all. Let me explain for everyone. When I have on this list that it doesn't need special Passover certification is a baby formula. For those who are in that part of life where you have baby formula. Baby formula is kitniot. It is made, right? It is made from products that we cannot eat. Ashkenazim can't eat, but you are allowed to own it. You're allowed to have it, and babies can eat it. They're allowed to, and therefore you can have it and you can use it on Passover. But you should have separate bottles and separate preparation for it, so that it doesn't. So the actual formula doesn't get into your other areas. So you should make sure that you separate the bottles and you use those. But it is perfectly okay. I have a list of which ones are considered kosher and are fine. They're on that paper for anybody who needs that. Now, can you trust all kosher symbols? Not any one that says kosher. So first thing is, very often we think something has a kosher symbol and it doesn't. So that's the first thing to notice, that sometimes symbols, right, you might think are kosher symbols, but they're not. They're just trademarks or other symbols. But let's put those aside. The next thing is that you'll find sometimes the letter K on things. K is a letter of the alphabet. You're not allowed to patent a letter. So so anytime you see a letter K on a food, it might be kosher, but that doesn't tell you that it is. In other words, they're trying to tell you this food is kosher, but because the letter K cannot be patented, like in OU or in OK, or all these other symbols can be patented, which means that you have to follow our rules if you want to use it. Anybody can put a K on their food, and it doesn't have to mean anything. It doesn't mean that it's always the case. So, for instance, you'll find during the year, Kellogg's will often have a K, but it's really kosher. It is kosher, and it's under the OU. It's just that they, for whatever reason, put a K on it. There are a few companies like that will do it, but a K is not a symbol of kosher certification. Sometimes it could be used that way, but it isn't always. Yes?
Well, like, let's say Hunt's thick and rich spaghetti sauce.
What about it? It has an OK. No, it has a K with a circle around it. That's a symbol. That's okay.
So the circle means?
That means, because by having a circle around it, now that's a logo. Somebody owns that logo. That company that certifies kosher, you can't put that on your product unless you pay them, right? And they're only going to let you do it if you're kosher. Right? That's how you know. That's what the OU is, the OK. Those are all logos that are telling you something, because if they put it on there without permission, they can be sued, and they will be. Right? They will be forced to take it off, even if they've run 1 million of them. They have to take it off.
There's one that is fooled me for a long time, and it was the K Harav. It's on flour, and it's on many, many
again,
things.
it could be that it's kosher.
Well,
right, but the
not
K
at
itself doesn't mean that.
No.
Right. Like you're saying.
V, it has a V and a K in it.
A V?
It has the shape of V, like the chicken fish you buy, it has the V.
Sobeys has the V.
Sobeys.
That's on some of their vegetables, no?
No, this is on frozen filet.
Okay, I'd have to look to see for sure.
Let's say like molasses, is molasses kosher?
Well, they have to be certified. So let's go on to the next part. If we go through it in order, we'll probably catch most stuff, and then we'll take questions. All right. So are all of them acceptable? Now let's say we now know which ones are really kosher symbols. The answer again is no. Not all of them. I would say that if you go into a store like Sobeys, which is under the certification of the COR, and you purchase it in the kosher area, you can rely on the COR that everything there is a reliable certification. But if you go into Loblaws, you go into the Supercenter, which is perfectly fine. If you go and do your Passover shopping there, you have to be a little more astute, because they do not necessarily have people checking it to make sure that everything is okay. So they're a store, and they're offering you to buy whatever you want to buy. So in those cases, there are some. There's one that I want to warn you about more than others, and it's, in my opinion, is questionable, and that's on marshmallows, and it's by a Rabbi Sheinkopf, his name is, and he has his own approach as to why he does this, and he believes that it's kosher, but the kosher certifying organizations around North America do not accept it. And so just watch for that. I have seen it before in stores here for Passover, kosher for Passover marshmallows. So for some reason, we can go a whole year in my house without marshmallows, but for Passover, you got to have them. So we found them. But these ones aren't good. What?
What is his symbol?
It has his name on it. It has is his name. He has a symbol also, but his name is on it. David Sheinkopf. What?
What was the name again?
Sheinkoph.
I saw Manischewitz ones too.
Manischewitz wine?
Manischewitz.
Oh, there are marshmallows that are kosher Passover. It's this one is a problem.
The coconut one.
Anything that has gelatin in it, right, can be made kosher Passover. You have vegetable gelatin, but gelatin traditionally is made from horse hoofs. It's from an animal, and his opinion, according to what he told me years ago, was that it is these items are so extrapolated away from the original animal that they're no longer considered animal. So you can use it. Everybody else today in the world, not that he doesn't have a source to rely on, but today nobody else accepts that. So therefore, it's really not used. He's also on some halava. You can watch from there also. Yes.
I remember a few years ago they used to have the miniature chocolate, the miniature colored marshmallows that were kosher for Passover. I don't think they do anymore.
A lot of the companies are no longer here. I don't think Barton's is around anymore either. Right. All right, so now what about medications? Okay, so first thing is let's talk about prescribed medications, the ones the doctor gives you. So a couple of things to keep in mind. It is preferable, of course, not to eat anything that would have chametz or kitnios in it. It's preferable anything, right, ever on Passover. What about medication? So if it's possible for you to get your medication by going to the pharmacist and ask him to give you a brand of your medication within the limits that your doctor prescribes that is not kitnios and is not chametz, you should buy that. If it's not possible, and whatever it is that the doctor is prescribing for you, you need to take this. I'm not talking about vitamins. I'm talking about the doctor tells you need to take this medicine, right? And then we understand that a pill is not food. It's not food. Try biting one. You'll see. They're not food. They taste terrible. And because of that, even if it would have something wrong in it, if you ate it, it would be okay. But it is preferable not to use anything with chametz or kitnios. So if you can go to the pharmacy, like the Chabad pharmacy here, and it used to be Allen's, I don't know if they still do it, but there's a number of pharmacies around, plus I'm sure all the kosher books have listings. They will go through all the most commonly used drugs that people are prescribed today, and they'll tell you which maker of the drug, especially if it's been generically reproduced now, are the best for Passover. And if you can, you really should switch it. If you can't, if they're not available, you're allowed to use it otherwise. Do not stop taking medication the doctor gives you because of Passover. Right? If he tells you it's optional, that's something else. If he's giving you a food supplement, that's something else. But I mean, don't stop taking your blood pressure pills, okay? It's important. Don't do that. You should take them. Okay? Over the counter, so there is a whole different ballgame. Because over-the-counter drugs in general are what you're choosing to take. They make your life better, but you don't have to take them. A person's not going to die from it. And therefore, for the most part, these have to be kosher. And therefore, there are lists. I didn't make up a list. I can get you one. But there are lists in all of the different books, the COR, the Star K. Everybody has lists. It's best to use the COR because very often these types of over-the-counter medications are different in Canada than in the U.S. But you should check it. Lots and lots of health food pills that you buy in the health food stores are literally chametz. Lots of them. And the problem is that you realize that any pill you take, right, that in general, the amount of medication in a pill is a microdot. It's a very little bit of medication. The rest of it is filler so that you can take the pill. Right? So right, it's to bind. It binds the drug to something so that it'll stay in there and it won't get ruined. So you take a pill, it's going to be 90-something% something else other than the medicine. The medicine is in there, but it's not the pill. Right? So therefore, with the health foods, they're almost all the time they're using chametz. And since those are optional, you can't use it. You can't even own it. But when it comes to medication the doctor gives you, even though there's a lot of filler, it's preferable to get ones that are not chametz. If it has to be kitnius but not chametz, it's preferable to use kitnius than chametz. If you can get without either, that's the best. But if you can't, I can't say it strong enough, take your medicine. Okay? It's not food. What?
If it's by choice, take the medicine.
Well, that's different. That's not prescribed then. You're just choosing to take it.
No, it's prescribed, but the doctor says it's yours.
Right. If it's not kosher for Pesach, right, then and you can go without it. Now, like, let's say you're taking a medication for acne. Right? You can live a week without it. So if you want to go to the store and buy one that's kosher for Passover and they have it, fine. If they don't, I would say you should wait. Yes.
I've been medically told I have to take vitamin D. I'm supposed to take 2 a day.
So
that's
we should discuss it on our own, but you have to have another conversation with the doctor about that, and then we have to investigate alternative forms of vitamin D other than the most normal one. Right? There are other forms. Vitamin D is found in a number of sources. Okay. So we did prescribe those kind of natural. Paper goods, I mentioned some of the paper goods. The real issue with it is the cornstarch. So as much as it is not friendly to the environment, and we should try to be friendly to the environment, it's usually recommended that if you're going to use paper goods, use styrofoam plates, because there's no problem with styrofoam at all. There's no question of anything being added to them. They are a little more expensive and they are not as good for the environment, so don't overdo it, but it's preferable. Same thing with cups. It's preferable to use a styrofoam cup over a paper cup, in case the paper cup might have cornstarch on it. Now you can buy ones that are certified kosher, that do have hashgacha on it, that will tell you it's kosher for Passover, and sometimes they're not even more expensive, but you should look into it. Yes?
But what about I know that Sobe sells plates like for Passover all year round. They're white with gold or silver.
If they say they're for Passover, you can use them. If they don't say it, so then they're just selling them all year long, right?
What about, I don't know if you're going to cover it next week, stay in your fridge, you're getting ready to clean up the fridge, and then in your freezer, because I have some fish, which is sealed, it's under the OU, that's with locks. So I don't think I'm going to get rid of it before.
So when we go through the one that talks about cleaning out your fridge, we'll do it.
Cover it next week.
Yeah, it's not very difficult. Now, let's go into, because we're almost at the end of our time. I don't want to miss some of these things. Toiletries. The toiletries, let's cover cosmetics and toiletries together. That would be anything from soap, shampoo, deodorant, perfume, makeup, all of these types of things. So this is the following rule. In general, many of these things are inedible, and that if you gave them to a dog, this is what the Jewish law says, that if a dog would eat it, then it's considered somewhat edible. Most of these things, because they have alcohol, that's not drinking alcohol, but wood alcohol in them, they taste as horrible, and don't try it, because you'll go blind or die. But it's terrible. And it's but that's things like ban roll-on deodorant. It has that in there. A lot of perfumes, a lot of aftershaves, they all have that in there. Because of that, you're allowed to use them, because they're not edible, they're not food. There are definitely toiletries that are made for Passover, and if you need to buy something, it's preferable to buy one like that. However, if you look on my list, you'll see that for toothpaste, there are many toothpastes that are kosher for Passover. Many that don't say it. They're just right, and I give you a list of some of the brands. If I didn't have a complete list, there is more in the books, but I'm pretty sure I have it in here. No? Did I not put it in this time? All right. Well, all the books do cover all the different ones, and if you need, I can always tell you about them. Yes?
So aftershave, though,
I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
like the aftershave from the deodorant, but
yeah.
I've been told because they have alcohol, they're not kosher for Passover.
Well, they're wood alcohol. They're not. And see, here's the argument. It's an interesting argument. A dog won't eat wood alcohol,
no.
Right? But a human will. And I know a human will because you read about it in the paper, where people who are such alcoholics, right, don't have the money for liquor, they will go in and buy wood alcohol. They'll buy rubbing alcohol and they'll drink it, and they'll dilute it with the hope that it won't make them blind or die, and then we'll get drunk. So a human being will drink it. So there are people who say that therefore you can't use these things on Passover because a person will drink it. Not you and I wouldn't drink it, but it is possible that a person would drink it. The overwhelming opinions are that it's not that way, that they won't. That if a dog won't eat it, it means that a sensible person won't eat it either. But and that's the threshold that the Talmud uses. But certainly you will find in all the kosher books lists and lists and lists of aftershaves that are 100% kosher and perfumes that are 100% kosher. And it's always preferable on Passover to always use the things that are kosher for Passover if they're available. It's just that for somebody, if it's important to you to have aftershave and you can't access one that is kosher, then you'd be allowed to use it. I mean, what I do, to be honest, I just don't use it. I mean, it's like you know what? And I don't have any. I don't get attracted. Nobody gets attracted to me any more or less because of it. So.
Well, technically speaking, you don't have to use aftershave for 33 days starting the Passover.
You don't have to?
No.
Well, you don't have to ever use it.
No, I mean, technically speaking, that's why we don't shave custom.
Oh, I see. You got it. He's talking about the Omer. Yes.
Makeup and lipstick.
So, makeups and lipsticks, there are many brands that are kosher for Passover. You should find one. All the books list them. Anything that you're going to put in your mouth can be a problem. So it's not just lipsticks, it's the toothpaste. That's why there is a lot of toothpaste. Mouthwash is another question. Anything like that, especially mouthwash, because it's made to taste good, right? And they do have alcohol in it. Also, a lot of over-the-counter drugs that like cough syrups are, if you read the ingredients, you never let your kids take it, because it's the ingredients usually have a very high amount of grain alcohol, like drinking a beer. Okay, one of the things is that alcohol numbs your throat, so they put it in there. Also, that they taste good. When they taste good, and it's not prescribed by a doctor, Jewish law considers it to be food, and therefore you're taking it because you don't want to cough, but you may as well just take olive oil. And in other words, that's food. It's like food. So when it comes to cosmetics, most cosmetics that you're going to find that are not put in your mouth are going to be okay to use. Same thing with shampoos. Right? The only shampoos that are a problem are ones with beer. That was a fad back in the 80s. You don't see that much anymore. In general, you're not going to find problems with any shampoos, conditioners, any of that. They're all fine because of what they are, because of how they're used and what they are. But when you put something in your mouth, we have to be much more stringent. So lipsticks and other types of things, you'll find that, like I noticed in some of the books, 15, 20 brands, major companies, that stuff is kosher.
How about hairspray?
I never looked it up. I'd have to look that one up. Hairspray, it's not something I come across. Oh, look, it's right here. No certification needed at all. Hair gels, sprays, and mousse hair treatments. There you go. Hairspray's fine.
What pure olive oil? Like you see olive oil, and you buy this certification, costs you a fortune. Costs you $15 for a liter. You buy one of the other brands that are always on sale under OU. And you use that.
Right, but it is a food, and you're going to be using it as a food. So unless we can find a source that says that it is also kosher for Passover, you'd have to buy the kosher for Passover one. Not a big one necessarily, but you should. Yes.
I just wanted to ask you about paper towels. Can we assume that what Sobeys has for Passover is without cornstarch?
Yeah, if it's in the kosher Passover section, one of the pluses of Sobeys, you might pay for that plus, but they do check their stuff. The only time you have to be concerned is another shopper puts something in there, into that area. They're not going to put a shelf full, but they'll put one. So always be careful with that. But let's see. Okay, so that covers most of it. One of the most important rules is I put my phone number on here. You can go into the store. You can be in the store. You can look at a sign, and you don't know if it's okay. You can call me. And today, most of us have cameras on our phones. You can take a picture of the certification and send it to me, and I'll be able to tell you. And you never have to worry about calling me and saying you're bothering me, because if you are, I won't answer. Well, I mean, I'm asleep or something, right? So but it's fine. That's why I put my phone number here and my email address, so you can feel free to ask. These things that I put on these papers are not the only things. You are going to find in some of the books, especially the COR, they're going to have some things in here in their book that I don't have. There are a few things I have that they may not, but you can trust what they say and you can trust what I wrote. They're both going to be accurate.